Sex is emotional work. The three underlying principles of any sexual activity, for the most part, are...
It's our responsibility as the receivers of no to stay with the no and not fall into the prey of our fears and our worries and our anxieties.
If we're able to create that sense of safety of like, if it's a no, it's a no. I'm open to whatever that looks like. Thinking beyond the no, there's so much we can do. There's so many things and so many avenues we can pursue with the person that we're attracted to, with the person that we're in a relationship with, when you can be comfortable with that no.
Welcome to the Authentic Man podcast. I am your host, David Chambers. This is a podcast for men who want more and less from life. More deep connection, more emotional intelligence, more self-awareness, and more great sex. And less heartache, less conflict, less overthinking, and less stress. Creating dating lives, sex lives, and relationships that are incredible and authentic. My deepest goal is that you, the listener, can take away what you hear in this podcast and apply it to your life so that you can experience greater happiness, transformational growth, deeper relationships, and profound sexual intimacy. I believe that as men, we are capable of so much more depth than we are shown or led to believe. So join me as we get deep into this.
Welcome back to another episode of the Authentic Man podcast. I'm your host, David Chambers. And today I have with me a wonderful guest, a man who I thoroughly enjoy talking to, actually. Cam Fraser has been on the podcast before. He is, Australia's leading sex coach, and sexologist. He is absolutely fantastic to talk to. We've done an episode before a couple of years ago, which he talked a lot about pre and post pregnancy sex, actually, and his journey with his with birth and pregnancy, which is very poignant for me at this point in my life as well. But today we really talk about, we start off actually talking a lot about his work that he's doing in schools, around teaching young people about sex, about consent, a lot about boundaries and stuff. And he actually goes into some detail about this. And I think it's really valuable. You can hear this like, for kids, but actually it's really valuable for you as an adult, because this is an education that we didn't get. He goes into depth talking about how we can say yes and no, how we can look for verbal and non-verbal cues of yeses and nos as well. Because, ultimately, sex is a lot of non-verbals, right? And a lot of people don't want to necessarily be verbal during sex. We talk about no. We really get into giving and receiving no's gracefully in a way that you saying no to sex from your partner or the reverse, your partner saying no to you, right, can be a doorway to understand your better self-awareness, self-understanding, but also a doorway to have more expansive sexual experiences and connection experiences. And we talk really about some of the fears that come up around saying no or receiving a no, some of the stories we then tell ourselves unconsciously that come up around no, and this kind of, what it means about us if our partner says no to sex for us. We touched a little bit about the kind of how we can bring the kind of social ideas of feminism maybe into relationship. I talk a little bit about that. And we talk about why men don't say no to sex. Why is it that men are culturally told not to say no to sex as well? And we go into intensity as well. Cam talks about intensity and like what to do if you are feeling intensity, you want more intensity, and how you get that in other areas of your life, as well as what to do when your partner says no. We actually lay out some suggestions for other things you can do together or alone as well. And that's a really interesting part of the episode. But this is a sort of episode, and I say this at the end, but I say it at the beginning as well. It's the sort of episode that if you're in a relationship, you may want to listen this with your partner. Maybe listen to it first and then bring it to them, because it's going to be really useful to help you understand each other a bit better, especially if you're finding that you have a little bit of tension in your relationship, when one of you says no, maybe one of you shuts down, one of you gets angry or frustrated or upset or takes it personally. This can be a really good episode for you. But without further ado, I'll let you jump into the episode. Welcome back. to another episode, and today I have with me a guest who's back for the second time. A wonderful man who I followed and learned much from over these years, and I was really looking forward to this conversation because I find every time I speak to him, I learn something. Every time I land on his page, I learn something. It's a wonderful way to put the esoteric, the very practical, and the researched all into one beautifully constructed reel or piece of content, and the conversation how it been magical. So I'd like to introduce you today, Cam Fraser. How are you doing today, Cam?
I'm good, mate. I'm good. I've just had a day of teaching years 8, years 10, and years 12 at high school down in Brisbane. So I'm feeling like, passionate and enthusiastic about the work and the way that it can really be impactful for young people, as well as the men that I work with on a day-to-day basis. So yeah, it's been a good day, man, and I'm excited to end my day with a conversation with you.
Fantastic. And I'm curious, what's it like teaching? What are you teaching, and what is it like teaching kind of those years of young men, young boys, young people?
Yeah, so it was very consent-oriented, respectful relationships and sexuality education was what the presentations were. But we were talking about boundaries, and we were talking about, what are the 3 underlying principles of any sexual activity, whether it's holding hands and kissing for maybe the year 8s, for example, to any sexual activity that year 12s might want to engage in if they are sexually active. And those 3 principles, for the most part, are making sure that both people want to, that there's a mutual wanting, making sure that it feels good for both people, and making sure that it's free of coercion and manipulation. And so we spoke about where some of that coercion can come from. We use in the workshop, we use a analogy about asking for money. So say that our friend next to us has $10 and we've got to try and convince them to give us their $10 note. What are some of the ways that we might do that? Kids come up with, I shouldn't say kids, they're young people. Kids is a little bit insensitive for them there. But the kind of excuses that they come up with in order to get this money from their role-playing partner is stuff like, hey, I'm starving and I'm poor and I need the money to buy food, and please give me the money, please, I promise you, I'll pay you back, I promise I'll give you more money tomorrow, or some young people will resort to, if you don't give me that money, you're going to regret it. There's some bad things are going to happen, or other ones, whatever. There's all these really interesting ways that these young people will role play that scenario and try and really convince this other person to give them that $10 note. And we say, okay, well, let's think, legally here. If there's a scenario where you go and ask someone for some money, a $10 note, whatever, we can use that scenario, and they say, no, you can't have it. You say, well, please, I really need it. I need to buy some food. I'm starving. And you say no, and they go, well, okay, no worries. And they walk away. That's fine. There's nothing ethically legal. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you then, resort to, hey, if you don't give me that money, something bad's going to happen to you. And that person feels like they can't say no to you anymore, and they give you that money. Well, that's robbery, right? From a legal standpoint. And so we use that as an analogy to then speak about consent in a sexual context, right? So, hey, everyone else is doing it. Why don't you want to do it? If you really loved me, you would, well, come on, please. I promise you're going to really enjoy it. Trust me, you'll really enjoy it. All this emotional coercion, right? It doesn't have to be a threat of physical violence, but there's an underlying coercion that's happening that isn't, consensual, that sexual activity isn't consensual. And again, that goes from holding hands. We talk to year 8s about kissing and holding hands. We talk to year 12s about, more, we don't mention any sex acts, but just say sexual activity in general. And so the idea is to get them thinking and reflecting about the way that they're potentially pressuring their sexual partners or romantic partners or friends even into doing things that they might not want to do. So just having that awareness and being cognizant of that. So that's a major part of it, is consent education. That's partly because it's mandated here in Australia to, every child at school needs to be taught consent. It's part of the education framework. But then beyond that, there's the skills development side of things. So we kind of share like ways to say no, one of the pieces of feedback that, has come from the research, we're asking, school-aged, teens, like, why are some of the reasons, there's statistics floating around here in Australia that 40% of sexually active teens, school students in Australia have at some point had unwanted sex. Like 40% is like a ridiculous number. And the main reason why is peer pressure, right? And there's scenarios in the literature and in, real life context of speaking with students of, two students having sex and neither one of them wanting it. But because they felt like everyone else was doing it, we should just do it, and they didn't actually want to, but they felt like the pressure from their peers was too strong for them not to do it. And then other reasons why is alcohol as well. It's another major factor. So we did some like alcohol education and the way that it impacts your ability to consent. But one of the other things that comes up from the research is like people's inability to say no because they don't know how to say no. They don't have the language to tell the partner no, maybe in a way that isn't going to hurt them. They don't want to hurt their partner's feelings. So they say yes when they don't really mean it because they're not really sure how else to say no to the partner. So there's like some skills acquisition there that we do, is like just giving them ways and things that they can say in order to express that there is a no there. So yeah, there's a whole bunch of stuff in there, but it's very consent heavy. It's very like communication oriented, and it's just like underlying principles. There's no like, I might feel like what I do in my adult education with like adult men is like, hey, here's some ways that you can self-pleasure. Like here's some really practical things that you can do when you're watching porn. Here's like some really amazing ways of like exploring your body. None of that comes into the education that we do in schools, right? It's much more like focusing on the underlying principles of respect and kindness and care for yourself, care for others, like compassion. So yeah, it's an interesting approach, but it's a way of keeping parents happy, keeping schools happy, making sure that these young people are getting the education in an age and developmentally appropriate way as well. So said my piece there, man. Hopefully that wasn't too much of a ramble, but I know people get stuck on this like fear almost of like, what are people talking to kids about sex? Like I notice a lot of people feeling like quite activated by sex education in schools. And so like wanted to maybe allay some potential anxieties or fears that listeners possibly have when, sex ed and schools are kind of mentioned in the same sentence. So hopefully that made sense why I kind of went on a bit of a preamble there.
Yeah. But it's, I'm just hearing you say that. It's like, it's so powerful that they're learning this at such a young age, because these are the same issues that we're seeing in adults, right? An inability to say yes or no, like, coercion, being pressured, all these, the kind of, it's the stuff around sex that enables and helps us have sex that we want and enjoy. That really, I look back at, my schoolhood and childhood, it's like no one taught us about sex. They were like, banana, condom, there's some talking about pregnancy, and then that was sex education completely finished. But I think it's so important that we have an expanded sex education that like includes these pieces that you talk about, consent and so forth, which are so important because we can take these into other areas of life. They're transplantable into other areas of life. Like consent is something we're dealing with at work all the time, or with our families and all these things. Are so important. But I think often we forget how like kids become sexually active or thinking about sex way before we think they do.
Mm-hmm. Totally, man. And one of the things that is important to acknowledge because of the work that I do is, and you mentioned this, David, it's like these young people become the adults that, you know, I see in my clinical practice, right? Like that, like without the education, like I've seen the issues that happen when they don't get this education at this age, right? I'm dealing with the consequences of that in my practice with, you know, adult men. And, you know, one of the I guess like fears that a lot of these guys are expressing to me in my clinical practice, and these are, you know, adult men, is like the lack of knowledge that they have. Like they don't know, you know, they're like, I didn't get this education. I didn't get, like, no one told me, you know, I don't know what to do. You know, like I've been trying to watch, you know, porn. Maybe that's where I'm getting my knowledge from, but like, that's not really helping. I don't really know who to talk to. There's so much misinformation online and people saying like really hectic, misogynistic shit that like really maybe doesn't resonate with me. Like, I don't know what to do, man. Like, I need help. I need guidance. I need accountability. I need someone to like sift through the bullshit for me and like help me talk about sex or communicate about it or like express my sexuality in a way that's, you know, I don't want to hurt people. Another fear that I notice with a lot of guys is like they don't want to cross boundaries. They're concerned about hurting their partners. There's a fear of doing the wrong thing, of making their partners feel uncomfortable, or of like, you know, I don't work with a lot of single guys, but the guys that I do work with who are dating and you know, wanting to find partners, is like, you know, they don't want to make women feel uncomfortable. They kind of recognize that there is tension there in the dating, you know, the dating sphere, and they don't want to contribute to that. They're like worried about being creepy. There's a fear of being a guy who crosses boundaries and not respecting, you know, the people that they're dating. And so, yeah, so I hear all the time from guys in my, you know, practice, like, man, I wish I would have spoken about this 15 years ago. You know, it's a common refrain that I hear from guys. It's like, God, I wish, you know, I'd had this conversation however many, you know, years ago, depending on how old they are. So yeah, it shows up, you know, when this education isn't given to people at a young age.
Yeah. Yeah. It's something I hear, those words. It's like, man, I wish I learned this stuff, you know, 15 years ago, because the thing, it's almost like the things we don't learn about just become things we're afraid of or we mishandle in some way. Like, you know, you talked about, one of men's main fears, and something that I've seen a lot with some of my clients, men who are in relationship, is this fear of, like you said, hurting their partner and being like, or a fear that their partner, they can't trust their partner's yeses and nos. Something that's come up a number of times actually in the last year or so with my work, is men who are like, you know, I've spoken to so many women about, you know, men that transgress boundaries, and what I've really got is that these women knew that it was a no at the moment, but they didn't voice it. And they're like, well, how can I trust my partner to say yes or no? And it's actually become a really interesting couple of really interesting conversations actually I've had. And I wonder if this is, I see you nodding. So I wonder if this is something that's also come up in your practice. And yeah, how does it say play out in a man's relationship?
Yeah, man, this is like, I mean, interestingly enough, I was doing some of this with the students today. You know, how can we tell? Or, you know, the first question was, you know, reflecting on times where we have said yes and we actually meant no. And, you know, the students would give examples of like, you know, going to the movies with their friends. You know, they actually didn't really want to go. They didn't want to see that particular movie because they don't really like that type of movie, but they said yes to their friends anyway because they, you know, either didn't know how to say no, or they just, oh God, everyone else is going, maybe I'll just do it anyway. So, you know, that the first part of this is like recognizing times in our own life where we have maybe crossed our own boundaries and said yes to something when we didn't actually want to. What did we notice in our body? You know, that self-reflection, that self-awareness, that somatic element of like, boy, yeah, it made me feel like really tight in my stomach, or I felt like a lot of, pain in my shoulders, maybe feel like really tense or whatever it might be, like really starting to recognize that in your own body, because that awareness is what's going to lend itself to greater empathy with a partner, right? Like that awareness of your own experience, putting yourself in other person's shoes, as you might like to call it. It's like one of the things that can then lend itself to being able to reflect on like what your partner might be experiencing. And then we talk about, I did this with students today, talk about verbal and non-verbal cues, right? Does this person say yes, but their body says no? And what are some indicators that their body might be saying no? Well, they might be crossing their arms. They might, take a step back. They might be leaning away. They might be putting a hand up. They might be really stiff. What are some ways that we can have more awareness of what's going on physically for the person in front of us? And that, there might be a skills acquisition piece there for, these men that we're working with. They might not even really know what to look for, those kind of verbal, or I should say, non-verbal cues. Like maybe they just haven't been given the instruction to pick up on those, right? Because we're so used to everything has to be verbally communicated. Like that's where a lot of emphasis is placed. So there's an opportunity to really reflect on, okay, I'm hearing one thing from my partner, but the body language I'm getting from this is not congruent there. And if that is the case, check in, right? Like if you're noticing that you can't trust your partner's yeses and nos, then don't take it at face value, right? And this is not to say like, oh, you're second guessing, which is like a different energy, let's say, but there's an opportunity to go, I just want to I want to double check. I just want to make sure, like I'm wanting to build trust and connection with you in this relationship, in this container that we have, especially erotically, especially sexually. Like I want to help you feel as safe as possible. If it's a no, that's okay. Like I will cop that. I'll accept that. I'll respect that. One of the reasons why we might have a partner who doesn't feel comfortable saying no is possibly because historically when they have said no, it has not been respected. It has not been something that's either, not been respected, and also maybe not something that's been received very well, right? And maybe there's been some hostility to the no. And so now there's a reluctance to say no, or a fear of saying no. And so if we're able to create that sense of safety of like, if it's a no, it's a no. I'm not have my ego is not going to be bruised by that. I'm not going to respond with hostility or aggression. Like I'm able to accept that no. I'm able to to be in the no with you and not get. It's not. I call this the no big deal mentality. Like, hey, it's no big deal. Like I'm still here with you. I'm not going anywhere. I'm happy to pivot to something else. Maybe that particular sex act is a no. That's all right. Do you want to do a little massage instead? Rather than going full intercourse, penis and vagina penetration, do you want to just cuddle on the couch and just like, stroke each other's thighs, or, do some belly to belly and whatever it is, right? But there's an opportunity there to like really build trust by respecting boundaries and checking in. And it doesn't have to be like this interrogation, this weird interrogation of like, are you really sure? How sure are you? Like on a scale of 1 to, there's an opportunity to like, just to navigate that, to roll with the punches, and to like be creative and spontaneous in those moments where maybe you're not entirely sure if it's a 100% yes. Okay. That's fine. It doesn't have to be, like let's move to something that does feel more comfortable in those moments. And it's, it's collaborative, right? It's not all on you. It's on your partner to do their work as well, to feel more comfortable and assertive in expressing their yeses, and also to feel more grounded and solid in saying no. And there's ways of communicating a no in a way that isn't so fucking brick wall and really harsh, because that can be, it can hurt to receive a rejection, to have a partner be like, no, fuck off. Which obviously they might not say that, but it could very well be like that's how it's received, as opposed to like, hey, I'm actually not able to do that with you right now, but I'd love to do this instead with you. Here's what I do have capacity for. I can sit with you and we can do a little bit of, touching of each other's bodies. Maybe we can make out. Maybe we can jump in the bath together and we can, whatever it might be. Or it's like hey, not right now. I'm kind of feeling a bit stressed out from work. I need to just have some time for myself. I'm feeling touched out by the kids. I can't do any more physical touch right now, but how about we set aside some time on a Thursday night to spend some time together? That's a much softer and typically more well-received no than no, I'm not in the mood, right? So there's like opportunities to explore that compassionate communication piece with our partner, right? We want to be considerate. So we're in relationships, right? We want to be considerate of our partner's feelings. We don't want to hurt them. So if there's ways to communicate more effectively where there's a more expansive, offer of initiation, let's say, which it isn't like, hey, if we don't have sex right here and now in this particular way, I'm going to be pissed off, right? Which is, maybe a hyperbolic example of the way that some guys do approach sex. And comparatively, if there's not a, no, I don't want to have sex, I don't love you, or I don't desire you, which is typically how a lot of guys will take a no. If there's more expansive no's and more expansive initiations, more expansive rejections and initiations, that allows for a lot more flexibility, right? Allows for a lot more exploration and curiosity and communication to happen. So I don't know if that makes sense. I'm rambling now. It's kind of getting later at night, but hopefully there was something in there that resonated.
No, it's like I'm hearing there. It's like the way there's a responsibility on both people here in the way that there's like trust, like trusting your partner. Like trusting your partner has the power to say yes and no, I think is a really important part of what I'm hearing you say. But also then the person who may be receiving the no is like also empowered in going, it's okay for me to check and to just like name what I see, name hey, I hear you saying no, but I get a sense that, I got some other cues about whether you really, what didn't feel like a yes. So I'm just being clear here, like you can say no, that's totally fine. And that can do a lot for a partner who maybe even didn't realize that their body was a no, right? In that moment, they might have thought like, okay, yes, I want to do this. And their reasons might be, oh, we haven't had sex for a few weeks, I should say yes. So they say yes, but their body's like a no. And then when they're kind of presented with another kind of check-in, they're like, oh, actually, yeah, I am a no. And the way we receive that, again, is being able to receive the no and not attach a story to it. Because I heard you saying there around, often we can hear a no and it's like, no, fuck you. When actually the no is just like, not right now or not today. It's like, also we have a responsibility of receiving the no and going, that's just no now. Especially if it's kind of given in a way that is, kind and gentle and reasonable, and not allowing our mind to kind of engage or our fears to engage of like, oh, my partner doesn't love me anymore. She doesn't find me attractive. She's sleeping with somebody else. Like, because I've heard from men sometimes when they've said no, and that's also another thing is like men saying no to sex, where their partners have kind of like escaped into the kind of what I like to call kind of almost like delusional story as well. But it's our responsibility as the receivers of no as to like stay with the no and not fall into the prey of our fears and our worries and our anxieties.
Yeah, you're so right there that we make it mean something. And I say we because I still make no mean something, that I'm still working on it. There's a story that pops up that my partner doesn't want me, that my partner doesn't desire me, that I'm not attractive to my partner, right? If, I'm the person who's initiating and propositioning my partner. And that comes from a place of, fear and insecurity about my looks, about my manliness, about my masculinity, whatever it might be, right? There's a self-worth fear that gets triggered for me personally as Cam when my partner responds with a rejection to, my sexual advances. Because I do the work, my partner does as well, and we do it, collectively together, I'm able to like communicate that to my partner. I'm able to like let her know, like, I feel a little bit hurt, by that, rejection if it's like if that's what's alive for me in that moment, or I can, I've also got the skills to be like, along the lines of like, hey, I'm feeling a bit disconnected. I want to have a bit of time for us, that's like what's alive for me. I'm kind of feeling this disconnection from you, and I'm craving a bit of intimacy and just a bit of skin to skin time. Is there how are you going? That's what's alive for me. Like, what are you noticing? Very often my partner goes, yeah, I'm feeling the same thing. Thank you so much for saying it. And so there's an opportunity for us to go, okay, what do we do? Like, let's set aside some time, and let's like bring some presence to that feeling and work through it together. So like having that, like, and again, the fear behind that is like the fear of being vulnerable, the fear of expressing my desires to my partner, expressing my insecurities to her. And we've been together for almost 10 years now. So there's an opportunity, for people that maybe haven't been in a relationship for that long to really navigate that early doors, because it's only going to help you have a like thriving sex life throughout the duration of your relationship. But people that have been in a relationship for a long time and like haven't communicated that, there's also fear there of like, oh God, like this is different to the way that we've been communicating for like so long. And that's what I find with some clients that have been in a long-term relationship, is like the way that this is going to uncover and unsurface a bunch of stuff that maybe hasn't been talked about, for 10, 15 years in that relationship. And so I find that like a bit of a barrier to entry, is the fear of, what if I do start saying to my partner, like, God, what's that going to bring up? How's that going to change things? So there's like, again, fears, insecurities, things that are around sex that don't have anything necessarily to do with the sex itself, but around the communication aspect, the way that it's like going to change the relationship, the disrupting of old communication patterns and things like that. So hopefully there's something there for people that are listening to be like, oh yeah, I'm noticing that particular fear over there. I'm okay here, but maybe there is like something over there that's like maybe stopping me. So yeah, I just want to like really articulate that there are different experiences of fear and insecurity and anxiety around sex, that maybe one lands for you, but the other one doesn't. And we're kind of all a little bit slightly different, I find, where fears pop up. So doing a bit of kind of self-sleuthing about where your fear is can be really helpful.
Yeah, because there's so much that's intertwined in there. The fears that's often just that no, and we're kind of staying with just saying no raises multiple fears for the person who's saying no and the person that's receiving no, which take us out of the moment of being kind of together. And you touched on that, and one of the things that I kind of feel is really present, not just for myself, but also I see it in not just but sex. I also see it in relational moments, is that I think one of the fears we have about saying no is that no, if I say no, then I'm going to lose connection. I'm going to lose the sense of connection between me and this other person, and we kind of will massage our no into a maybe, or just say yes, because we desire to keep the connection, because we have habitually experienced no, as you kind of described before, as like a brick wall, as like a cut off. Like, if I say no to this person, they're going to shut down and remove themselves or leave. When actually we want to be able to say no and remain in connection. I think this is like a really key piece around consent, I think, is allowing our no to be, it's almost like no and I still love you, no and I still want you, not just like no and fuck off, because we've experienced so many no's that are like fuck off and no.
Yeah, and I love that the way I articulate it is like it's a soft no, right? And it's from a place of consideration, because there might be times where, and I just watched a video prior to jumping on here of like this woman being harassed, right? She was kind of videoing herself being harassed by this guy, and I get why, because of the context. She didn't say no, fuck off, because guys can respond with a lot of hostility if that's the way that's communicated, and I get wanting to not put yourself in harm's way, And also, no, fuck off is like what is definitely needed in a scenario like that, right? Like that's the type of rejection that and the energy that needs to be behind that. And I get why it's difficult and sometimes not safe and practical to do that. But when it comes to like our relationship, right, someone that we deeply care about and we're in that relational container with, like the consideration that I often ask, regardless of who's saying no, is like there's a compassionate no, right? I would hope that if you're in a relationship with someone, you don't want to intentionally try and hurt their feelings, right? And oftentimes, because we're not given a lot of education around the way to communicate rejection to our partners, to anyone really, we say no, and again, I speak for myself. I was not really given any education about how to receive a no well. I had to navigate that myself as an adult. Like the way that that's interpreted is, and again, from a place of fear and wounding and insecurity, is like, oh, this person doesn't want me or doesn't desire me, doesn't find me attractive, whatever it might be. But one of the things like my partner and I are able to like do with one another now, and similar to what you were sharing, is we come to a place where like she'll say no, and she'll be able to say like no, but I still love you is like the word that you use. But like her way of framing it might be, hey babe, like I'm not really able to do it right now. I've got to edit this video for work that I need to get done tomorrow. But once I'm done that, do you want to just snuggle on the couch for a little while? Like there's a and like within consent education discourse, there's a very common phrase, which is no is a full sentence. Yes, I agree with that. No one needs to explain their no, right? It should be respected as a no. And also, when you're in a relational context, when you're in a relationship with your partner and you want to be considerate and compassionate and like, recognize that no, when it is a full sentence, can be interpreted quite hurtfully and painfully by your partner. It can be helpful if you want to explain your no a little bit, right? Like I want to say, like, I get that no is a full sentence and I'm not advocating for it not to be. I'm saying that in a relationship context, it can be helpful to be like, no, babe, I'm feeling a little bit touched out because of the kids. Or no, babe, I'm feeling a little bit stressed out because of work and I need a bit of time for myself. No, babe, I've got this thing that I need to do tomorrow and I just got to prep for it. Like it could just be a no, right? And that would be valid. And also I'm inviting couples in that, relationship context to elaborate on their no to help that communication aspect with their partner. Does that make sense? I kind of hope that was clear.
Yeah, because what it does, like what I'm getting from what you're saying is no as a full sentence is like no, and then it leaves the person in this kind of empty space of, oh, there's a no, but what does that mean? And their mind will run away with the meaning, right? Whereas if we, to aid the relational connection and the flow of love, as, the Gottmans might say, we would then explain our no and say, it's a no. And like you said, like I'm feeling tired or I've got a few things to do, because then we're giving context to the no. Like there's a context, but we don't have to give context, but actually it can aid the kind of connection between the two people in the relationship.
Yeah. And it's like, there's this balance, right? Because I'm very, very like aware of, let's call it the feminist lens to this particular conversation, and a feminist response might be, well, it's not, and we're using a heterosexual context here. And, typically the way that we've been framing it is like the woman doing the rejection, but the feminist response might be, well, it's not her job to coddle his emotions. He should be able to do it himself. He's not doesn't need to be mothered by her explaining her no's, right? He should just be able to like deal with the no as it is. And like, I get that, right? And I get that there's a balance to, not coddling your partner and having to wrap them in cotton wool, right? Like us as men should also be doing the work to be able to receive a no as a no, and navigate that by ourselves, navigate internally. Like I said, I'm very aware of like the story that I make a no mean or a rejection mean, because I've done enough work to know that that's like the trigger for me, the where the wounding is, and I can navigate that solo. So I want to like be mindful that like I know there is a response from that kind of feminist perspective to what I'm saying, and also I'm like, yes, but we're talking about like collaboration here. We're talking about like communicating with each other a bit more effectively, and I think that's helpful. That's my observation anyway.
Yeah, and it's interesting because like when we reverse that lens and we, you know, the man is saying no, because I'm sure this is something you come across as well, is that what I see very often in the men that I work with is that like when they say no to their partners for sexual advance, like they don't necessarily, it's not necessarily held particularly well. And I'm just talking about the clients, I'm not talking about all women, is that, you know, the woman's like, why? What's wrong? What, you know, and it could descend very quickly into like, don't you find me attractive? Are you sleeping with somebody else? It really can blow up. And the man's just like, well, I'm just tired, or, you know, whatever. And it's the kind of work for both of us to do, because it's really, I'd love to know your thoughts on this. Like, I think it'd be really difficult because, you know, we've got this thing that's feminism that like lives in a socio kind of lens, but our relationships aren't really political vehicles between the two people, right? If we bring a lot of kind of these political ideas into our relationship, we can actually really damage the relationship and the flow of connection and love. Like, because how do I put this? A friend of mine, Kapil, said it to me really well many years ago. He basically said it is like there's no equality in a relationship, right? People will fall into roles that work for them, and things sometimes can be unequal in certain areas. Like, I don't know, I do all of the lifting of heavy stuff and making of all the furniture, you know, like, you know, as I mentioned before, and my partner also is pregnant. So like all the flat pack furniture that's arrived in our place in the last 2 months, I have built it on my own, you know, from beds to chest of drawers to everything. Now, if I'm like, oh, well, everything has to be equal, she has to do 50%, that doesn't really play to our strengths. And I think this is something that I have seen with men who are like, oh, they're really aware of feminism. And they're like, oh, I need to like make sure, you know, I'm being a good feminist in my relationship. And actually, sometimes I've seen that it's done harm to their relationships because they have almost trying to push for equality where there's no equality being necessary or needed, or it doesn't necessarily aid the two partners in love, connection, and growth in the relationship.
Yeah, I appreciate you speaking into that, man. And one of the things that like I recognize in my own relationship, for example, is we live like a very, let's call it traditional relationship. We're a single income family, which is my income. I'm like the provider, the breadwinner, if you will. My partner is, for the most part, you know, a full-time mum. That's writing off, you know, the work that she does do as a composer, as a singer, as a teacher. But she just doesn't do that enough because we have a 3-year-old son, and it's, you know, not viable for her to work as much because she doesn't make as much money, and we live in a, you know, place where we've got to pay rent and there's bills to pay, and like I have a business and I'm able to make enough money to do that. So, you know, we kind of gravitated to these roles of, well, I'm going to work many more hours than you are, and you're going to spend more time with our son than I am. And that is not to say, I mean, I am in a bit of a unique position because I work from home, so I can duck into the other room and spend like an hour with my son. It's also my own business. I can set my own hours. So there is like much greater flexibility there than say like a, you know, 9 to 5, you know, single income household. But, you know, my partner, because she has the time to do it, goes and does the grocery shopping. We then go to the markets on the weekend. We have some family time that, you know, we do and prioritize. And then I have time that I spend with my son. So, you know, one of the things that we've kind of navigated is the equalness or the equality in our relationship in terms of the roles that we have had to fall into. Like, and this is not to say that my wife would not love to do more of her work, because she loves her work. She loves the composing and the singing and the songwriting and the performing. And so we're trying to figure out ways to do that, you know, whilst also navigating the tensions of having to pay rent and having to, you know, set aside money for things that we want to buy. And I would love to spend more time with my son. And so we're navigating, how can I spend less time in my business and more time as a dad, you know, being present. And so, you know, that's a constant balancing. But within like the roles that we kind of occupy in the relationship, you know, I cook all the meals for our household, because my wife is, and she won't mind me saying this because we joke about it all the time, but is not a great cook. She doesn't really know what she's doing in the kitchen, and that's totally fine, because I really enjoy cooking. And so I'm happy to take on the role of the, you know, the cook in the family. That's fine. I'm happy with that responsibility. Like I said before, my wife does the grocery shopping. So that's our compromise. We're equal in that sense of like, we kind of both have come to an agreement that, you know, this feels good for us in the roles that we have. You know, and there's other, you know, scenarios in our relationship as well with regards to like doing the dishes and doing the laundry and things like that. You know, so we have, you know, balance and equality in that sense, that it all shakes out to be both of us feeling good about how much we're contributing to the relationship in that sense. But it isn't like okay, I'm going to do 50% of the dishes and you do the other 50% of the dishes, right? Like in that very like binary way of thinking about equality. So I wanted to like offer that, because I definitely agree with you that we can fall into those roles. And it's about using those roles and other responsibilities for running a household, taking care of kids, you know, navigating, you know, just having a person that you live with, like what feels good for the two of you, and how can you find that equality, let's say, or balance is like a better word that comes to my mind. So that's what I wanted to share. And the other thing that I wanted to touch on, because I do not want to breeze past this, is something really important that you mentioned, is the reverse scenario of like when guys say no to sex. Because a question that I will ask every single one of my clients is, have you ever said no to sex? And very commonly, the answer that I get from guys is no. No, I've never said no. And I ask them, were there times that you wanted to say no? Or like, you know, I might frame it differently. I said, are there times that like, you know, you had sex and you didn't really feel like it? And they go, yep. And I asked them, okay, why did you do that? And they'll share with me like they didn't want to hurt their partner's feelings. They didn't want to like, these are guys who are, you know, reflecting on their time being single and being younger. They didn't want their like casual partner or, you know, casual date, whoever they were like having casual sex with, to think that they were like less of a man essentially, or, you know, potentially they didn't want their partner to like, you know, think that they were a pussy or gay, you know, or whatever kind of other derogatory language they want to use. And you know, I'm using, not to say that calling someone's gay is derogatory, but like, you know, people use that as a slur. Same thing, you know, with the word pussy. Like pussy isn't inherently derogatory. It's a word that you can use to describe something, but like the way that people use it. And one of the other stories that I hear from guys when I kind of inquire about, well, why haven't you said no when you've wanted to say no, is like the insecurity around like not being a man. You know, like, well, guys are supposed to say yes to sex. We're the ones that initiate and pursue sex. We're the ones that are supposed to have a high libido, wanting to have sex all the time. You know, the old wives' tale that men think about sex every 7 seconds. You know, like like something's wrong with me if I don't say yes to sex, right? You know, and I kind of think of phrases that I've heard in my life, like every hole is a goal, or you know, like, you know, get like the phrase getting lucky comes to my mind. Like we should be so lucky to have sex. We should say yeah, regardless of whether sex is good or not. Like guys are just horny bastards and we'll just say yes to anything, right? Like we always want to have sex. And so I hear like that story in whatever way it's described by guys as well, of like, well, I'm expected to say, I'm supposed to say yes That's kind of like what guys do, and I've had to navigate that personally as well. Like I felt like it was my responsibility to say yes to sex and to always be escalating to sex, because if I didn't, then that meant something about me as a man. And I've heard from enough women who I kind of share this with, that they have perpetuated that at some point in their life, that they have, questioned a guy's sexual orientation if they said no to sex to her when she was propositioning it. You're like, oh, what, are you gay? Like there's a immediate like knee-jerk reaction to like, oh, something is wrong with this guy because he said no to sex. And then and it's sometimes that isn't like the first response. Sometimes the first response is like, oh, what's wrong with me? Oh, he doesn't find me attractive. Oh, he must not, he must be, and this is something that I hear more and more of, is like, he must just be watching too much porn, or like I can't live up to the porn. Like there's a lot of story around porn as well. Like there's a lot of fear around porn. And so that's one of the stories that I often hear. Or he doesn't find me attractive anymore. I think you shared it before. Like, oh, he must be getting it on the side somewhere else. Like there's a lot of knee-jerk responses to him saying no. Some of it is like triggering a self-worth story. Like I've shared, candidly about like my self-worth stories. Like, oh, my partner doesn't think that I'm attractive, when I know that's not the case, but that's the story that it triggers in me. I know for a lot of women that can be triggered when someone says no to them and their sexual advances. And also a very common response is like, oh no, something's wrong with him, because guys should always want to say yes to sex. Guys do always say yes to sex. There must be something wrong with him. He must have low testosterone or something. That's what I hear with a lot of guys. It's like, oh, I don't have raging thoughts about sex 24 hours a day. I must have low testosterone. It's like, no, bro, you're a human being. Like it's okay not to be thinking about sex all the fucking time. I could go on a big spiel about testosterone, but I just wanted to circle back around to that, because that was a super important point that you made, and I didn't want to brush past it.
Yeah. This is it is, and I think I'll move on after this. Is that the way that what we do to that little word that has two letters in it, and the meaning, and how it can just trigger so many insecurities in the moment when it happens, and its ramifications. Even touching on the sex education you're doing in school, it's like, if we can do the work, to receive that no and to give that no, and be with that and be okay with the emotions, like our sex lives will improve no end. Not just our sex lives, but our lives will improve in no end, because then we can be honest and truthful with the people we meet, and we can follow what we desire and what we want, instead of following what we think we have to do.
Right. And there's like such an invitation beyond receiving that no to like be creative and be spontaneous and be flexible and to be curious. Like if it's a no to this particular sexual activity, can you like get your ego out of the way and be like, okay, there's so many other ways of being sexual. There's so much variety. There's so much diversity. There's so many like things that we can do. What about this? Like if it's a no to that, cool, no worries. Thanks for telling me. Just the simple act of saying thank you when someone says no to you can be such a powerful thing. And then going, do you want to try this instead? Right? Like, hey, what about this? Oh, you're a bit touched out because you've been with our son all day. No problem. Totally get it. Thank you for sharing. Do you want to do some eye gazing? Do you want to, do you want me to rub your feet? Like whatever it is, like if sexual touch, I'm just on my pregnancy bandwagon because we were talking about it. But, if like sexual touch is like too much, hey, do you want me to just like rub your lower back, and just like put a hot water bottle on you and just cuddle up in whatever, I just want to be connected to you. I want to explore some touch with you. I'm open to whatever that looks like, so like thinking beyond the no. And again, I used the word expansive before. Like there's so much we can do. There's so many things and so many avenues we can pursue with the person that we're attracted to, with the person that we're in a relationship with. I really want to like invite people. We're talking about like a lot of the negatives of it, the fears and things, and like want to, acknowledge that. And also beyond that, there's like so much celebration of different varieties of pleasure, different ways of connecting with our partner, and being curious and exploratory and experimental. Like there's so much room for that when you can be comfortable with that no, as you were saying. So I really want to like emphasize the other end of that, the other side of the spectrum is the expansiveness from that.
Yeah. It can just open up so many doors. And I'll share because my partner also, she's 8-9 months pregnant now, and as you said, there's times where I'd be like, or I might not actually say the words you want to have sex, but I might run one of my scripts as we do as people, right? We run one of our scripts, and she'd be like, I don't really fancy it tonight, and I'm like, okay, and she's like, but it'd be really nice. I'm like, what's that? She might, would you give me a breast massage, or would you massage my back or my shoulders, or just hold me, like, can you just hold me from behind? Or something we do more and more now is we found this, we've been listening to this for a long time. I've been listening for a long time. This heart coherence breathing, the sound that kind of goes up and down, and we'll just lie there and listen to that together and breathe together. And what's really magical about that is that you start to cultivate different ways to experience the thing that you wanted to experience through sex. Because often through sex, what we're looking for is some level of connection to our partner. And that's the only avenue we have. We've been, pushing down that same road again and again. And then through trying, different things and being more expansive, as you said, we start to like increase our armory in the way in which we can experience that connection. So that isn't the only way that we can kind of approach our partner for connection. And that helps cultivate more connection in our relationship as general, but also allowing that the connection can be had in different ways and different moments, depending on what we both feel like experiencing.
I'm so glad you said that, David, because that is such a prevalent thing for a lot of guys, is the underlying need or desire that they have is connection and intimacy and closeness with their partner. But for a lot of guys, and I mean people in general, but for guys in particular, the avenue for meeting that need is sex, is like explicitly penetrative, sexual intercourse. And that was a big learning for me, was like, I'm pursuing sex with either my partner or before my partner with women, when what I want is intimacy and connection and closeness and physical touch. But because of my lack of education or my lack of awareness and the very stereotypical scripts that are, and narratives that we have around like men, my avenue for pursuing and meeting that need was to just like escalate to penetrative sex, right? Whereas if I was authentic, there had been so many times where if I had the communication and the vulnerability to do so, I'm like, hey, I don't really want to have like intercourse, or I don't want to have sex. I want to like hold you, just be with you, and just like just breathe you in and just like feel you and just like be in that beautiful erotic space that doesn't look a certain way. And that's something that I want to like really encourage guys that are listening to this to reflect on. I think it's such an important point to like unpack. Yeah, sex is pleasurable, and also there's usually something underneath just the pleasure and the gratification that we might want. And if we're able to acknowledge like what that underlying thing is, then it can lead us to, it prompts questions like, well, is there other ways of meeting that need? Is there other ways of exploring what it is that we want? Whether it's connection, and beyond that, it could be like, I want to be, an example is like, I want like intensity, it's like I'm pursuing sex because there's like an intense experience in the sex that I have. And maybe they, I'm thinking of one client at the moment, like the sex that he has is like really like, it's quite fast and it's quite like, in like the word is intense. It's like quite an intense experience for him and his partner, which leads his partner to be like, hey, I can't do that every single time. And so he's looking for like that intense experience, something that like makes him feel quite thrilled and alive. And so we're exploring together. Okay, if that's something that you want to share with your partner, it's like, he feels like those intense experiences with his partner or something feels like connected. It's like, okay, what are some ways that we can help meet that need that you have and that desire that you have for intensity that doesn't look like intense sex, right? And so we're exploring like some, more vigorous breath work practices, things that are going to like really activate him and like really kind of trigger that, nervous system response. We're kind of looking at like ecstatic movement practices as well, like ways of like getting his body moving in a way that like builds the heat and the tension in his body and makes him kind of feel like he's on that thrill ride. And, enrolling his partner in that as well. Okay. Like, hey, if we can open up the variety of avenues that you both have to kind of meet, these needs that we're trying to meet through this avenue of sex, then the analogy that I like to use here is adding things to your erotic menu. I've said this so many times, like hopefully people, who've listened to me talk maybe recognize that I'm saying this, but like there's so many things that we can add to this menu of things, these dishes that we can choose from when we're quote unquote hungry, or in this case, when we're horny, right? There's so many dishes that we can add to our menu that we can choose from to kind of help satiate that desire. And it doesn't always have to be, intercourse. So it's something I really want to like encourage guys to reflect on. Is like, are they just meeting an emotional need? And if they are, what are some other ways of doing that? How can you really like think expansively about that with your partner? And then, the impromptu actor in me, or improv actor, is like, and also sometimes sex is just, physical release, right? And that's what you want to do with your partner. Can you own that? Like, hey babe, I just like, you're like turning me on. Like, I'm so turned on. See, you were just wearing that thing, the way you've done your hair tonight. Like, I just want you, great. Maybe that's it. And if it's a no in that scenario and you've got this sexual charge, here's something you've not talked about. Can you go and do that solo? Do you have the relationship where if there is this, physical release that you're looking for, is there, agreement in your relationship? Is there openness in your relationship to be like, hey babe, like, I know you're not feeling it tonight. That's fine. I've got to go and do a self-pleasure practice. I've got to go and like do something with this feeling, and that's something my partner and I are open about. We're able to like talk about that. And so, you can see for those that are watching, like I've got sex toys, on my shelf behind my left shoulder. So like I'm able to go, great. I've got a whole bunch of things that I can use solo that I know my partner doesn't feel threatened by because we've had those conversations. And I'm able to like go through a self-pleasure practice and be mindful about that. So like there's an opportunity as well for people that are like listening. It's like, if it is something that you can do solo, by all means, like explore that as well and have that conversation with your partner. That can be a real, interesting conversation to have, because a lot of people have hang-ups around masturbation. But anyway, I'm getting off topic, but I wanted to throw that in there as well for a bit of spiciness.
Yeah, masturbation. We had this, as you said, some hang-ups about our partners and partners masturbating. And I guess it comes back to what we've mentioned so often. It's like meaning, like, oh, if in this moment, like my partner wanted to have sex with me and I say no, and they go and they masturbate, what does that mean about us? What does that mean about me? What does that mean about our relationship? And like, what am I thinking when I know I'm lying in bed trying to go to sleep and my partner's in his room with his self-pleasure practice and, or in an office or in the front room, whatever it is. And I guess for the listeners, it's like really stopping for a moment and, pause this if you need to and think to yourself, like, how would you feel, whether a man or woman? Because, as we've talked about, men can say no to sex too, and your partner may say that she wants to go and masturbate or the reverse. He may want to go and masturbate. And it's like, how would you be with that? How would you, like, what thoughts and feelings would you have? And are they really founded in anything? Because so much of what we think is just like taking us off from like, the authentic love of our relationship or partnerships. And some way we're trying to protect ourselves or we're fearing some sort of loss. Yeah.
And, if it's a recurring pattern that your partner is choosing masturbation over sexual, connection with you, if that's like a habitual pattern that's playing out in the relationship, again, obviously there's balance here. Like that's something to talk with them about, talk with a third party about, like if there's an issue. I don't want to say that like there is not going to be an issue when we're in relationship context, but before that, like if there's anything that is alive for you around masturbation, one of the things that I'm put my hand up and say, like, sex is like emotional work. Navigating another person's emotions and all the things we talked about with regards to fear and consent, and like there's a lot of emotional labor that goes into sex and navigating another person's body and making sure that they're experiencing pleasure. And this is even more so. I don't really have a lot of anxiety around sex with my partner, but I work with a lot of guys who do have a lot of anxiety around sex with their partner. And so there's even more emotional labor that's going on for them because they're navigating performance anxiety and tension in their body and like worrying about coming quickly and like all the other stuff. And so, like that isn't there when you're masturbating, right? All that extra stuff that you have to navigate when you're with another person. Sometimes you're like, oh man, I just don't have the capacity for that tonight, right? But what I do have the capacity for is like just some time by myself and to do some masturbating and some self-pleasuring and to just like be with my body and experience some pleasure and like whatever it is, right? Whatever you're getting from your masturbation and self-pleasure practice. So like that's a real thing. It's like actually one of the major reasons why people masturbate is because like it's an easier it's easier entry than it is to like be sexual with someone else. So I recognize that, there's been times where I've said no to my partner and that I know that she's run herself a bath and she's taken, a womanizer toy into the bath. And I'm like, God, thank God for that. Because I just I'm spent tonight. I don't have the capacity to like hold space and like go through the whole, like, this sounds so, I'll intentionally use this language, but like, the fucking rigmarole of sex, right? And try and like do the whole things and, like, because that's what I want to do. I want to light the candles and I want to give my partner this experience. I really want to do that. I just can't do that tonight, babe. I'm tapped, And so, we have a bath. We're lucky we have a bath. We've got toys, and we're open enough that she's like able to do that. And I'm like, again, like my response in those moments is like, oh, thank God for that. Like the pressure or the capacity that I don't have, like, I'm not gonna be stretched now, and I know that she's gonna feel comfortable, and like, we can come back and reconnect afterwards. So, I want to like really offer that as like a potential avenue to diffuse or alleviate some of the pressure and tension and expectation around sex, is to like have those conversations and those agreements and those, the permission is the word that comes to mind, but it's not the word that I want to use. But there's like the agreements, right? And the conversations that we had around masturbation that allow for those, scenarios to manifest and unfold. Permission is the wrong word there because you don't need permission to masturbate because it's your own body. But hopefully you're getting what I mean.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's in permission. I hear more like a that it's a agreement in a relationship, and even that word, it's like something that is encouraged. That's it. It's like encouraged for an encouraged agreement.
Yeah, celebrated.
Yes, we got there.
It's late, David. It's late. I'm struggling.
Before we wrap up, because the time has really flown as always. Something I've been doing actually with all the men that I've spoken to, and actually in particular the men I've been speaking to recently in the podcast, is, as I've mentioned, I'm having a baby soon. This episode will probably come out You'll probably be listening to this at a moment that either the baby's come or it's about to come. It's either come or about to come very soon. And I've been asking one piece of advice, one piece of wisdom for men like yourself, Cam, who for those first few weeks or first few months that you would impart on someone like me who's about to enter into that journey?
Oh, man. You know what? The biggest piece of advice I would give you, mate, is to, and I'm not saying that you don't do this already, but is to acknowledge the changes in your partner's body. And I mean, like, properly recognize that organs are shifting and she's growing a whole new organ in her body, the placenta. And like, that's going to then be like taken out of a body, and organs are going to have to like reshuffle and rejig themselves into their positions. And like I don't want to get too graphic here, but like the cervix dilating to like 10 centimeters is fucking crazy, man. And like then regardless of whether it's vaginal or a cesarean or whatever it might be, like the impact that has on a woman's body, on your partner's body. And like the reason why I'm really emphasizing that is because that acknowledgement and like the reason, like, it's big for me. Like, there's a lot of awe in that for me, like personally, of like, holy shit, that is intense. And like I can't comprehend that in my own body, right? Because I will never have that experience. And so like there's awe is the only way I can really describe it. But beyond that, then, because of that acknowledgement, because of that understanding for the most part, like the recognition is then the like behavioral change in me to that, right? Like and by this I mean like there's the reverence, and the like deeper love and admiration I have for my partner, right? And her body and the things that it's able to do. And then beyond that, there's like the tenderness. This, and people that have listened to me on your podcast before will know that my partner had a cesarean. So like the major surgery that she had to have in order to like deliver our son, like the rehabilitation of her body and like the slowness and the attentiveness and how attuned I had to be and wanted to be, because I could recognize the shifts and the changes in her body, like really just physically speaking. I'm not even talking about like the hormonal or emotional or mental changes, like literally the body. Yes, like that's like my biggest piece of advice is just like coming to a place of acknowledgement of her body. And the reason why is because like that'll change the way that you, David, you listening, that you like approach her body and the way that you have sex, like change the way I had sex with my partner. Like there was a, like I said, the word tenderness comes to mind, or there was a shift in like the way that I was, handling her body and using my hips and my fingers and the way I was holding her. And, that has now shifted again because she's recovered from birth, and we're 3 years on and she's getting more into her body again, and she wants different things as well because she's more into her body, and now she's boxing again and she's do exercising, and so she is able to like handle a bit more, and she, like I said, is desiring that. But those first 6 months, or even like the first 18 months, to be totally honest with you, man, like there's a recognition that there's shifts internally, and like respecting that and honoring that was like a big part of my journey as a man, supporting my wife and connecting with her still in new and interesting ways because of the changes of her body. So I don't know if I've, rambled on too much about that, man, but hopefully that landed for you, and hopefully that was something that was already on your mind. I'm sure it was.
Yeah, man, it's really powerful. I hadn't thought about it quite in the way that you put it there, so thank you. Yeah, I really brought that deeper into my awareness.
Yeah, well, thanks for asking, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm sure the listeners are now really intrigued where they can hear more from Cam, what Cam's got coming up in the near future in terms of offerings. Like, where can people find you? Where can people learn about, where can people work with you as well?
Yeah, if people have made it this far, listening to me just fucking yap this whole fucking time. My social media handle is the Cam Fraser on all social media platforms. And something you shared, David, at the beginning was that you like to check in with my social media because it's educational and that there's something on there that you'll learn. And I try to make that promise to people that if they follow me on social media or jump onto my profile at any point, that they'll hopefully learn something. I try to be as educational as possible on there. And if people are interested in like learning more about my work or working with me, they can head to my website, which is cam-fraser.com, and there's a couple of ways you can work with me there, and I won't harp on too much about it.
Awesome. Yeah, and I'm going to then add a little bit to that. If you are, there's plenty that Cam offers, and I know I'm not sure if it's a self-serve program, but I know you offer a program for women to understand men better. There's something that women are often coming to me, talking to me about. Cam's got a whole program. I glimpsed it earlier as well, and I've seen it before, that just aimed at that, helping women understand men better, because I think that, women are very good at wanting to understand men, and sometimes you find yourselves, I know because the women have spoken to me, down the wrong avenues or making guesswork. And I can assure you that Cam's program is very comprehensive in understanding men sexually and relationally as well. And if you're a man, he has a wonderful program around performance to pleasure. Performance to pleasure?
That's the new name. Yes.
Performance to pleasure. Which it looks fantastic. I had a look through that a few days ago as well.
Thanks, man. Thanks. Yeah. Thank you for prompting me to promote my own stuff. I appreciate that. It's a bit of a edge for me to do so. But Man Myths, Understanding Male Sexuality is the 6-week course for women, and it's self-paced, and you get lifetime access to it once you purchase it, so you can always return back. And there's like a panel discussion on there of men from different walks of life who share about their experiences. So you're not just hearing from me as like the be all and end all of like male sexuality. You're hearing from a panel of other guys who share about their experiences of sexuality and masculinity, and unpack that in real time for the women that go into that container. Performance to Pleasure is my 6-week course for guys, and that's all about similar to stuff we talked about here, like unpacking the stories that we have about what it means to be a man, to be a sexual man specifically, and also a lot of practical advice there for like connecting with your pleasure, for slowing down, for working through common sexual issues like coming quickly or struggling to get and maintain an erection. Thanks, man. Thanks for throwing me a bone there. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. And listeners, before we wrap up, this is probably one of those episodes that you're listening to, and there's probably someone that you can send this to, right? Maybe you can sit and listen to this with your partner. If saying no and receiving no has been tricky for you. So I implore you to do so, as a podcaster, to send that to someone, sit and listen to this with a partner, something that me and also used to do a hell of a lot, listening to podcasts together. And it's incredibly expansive for our relationship. So I will invite you into that. But I will let my wonderful guests get on, and myself, and I'll say to listeners, thank you and ciao. I want to say a big thank you for listening. It's people like yourself that really help get the podcast out into the world, especially if you're often sharing the episodes and the podcast with people that you feel just could do with listening, right? Can see a different way of being a man, maybe a different way of having dating lives and intimacy and relationships. So I want to say a big thank you. And if maybe after listening to this episode, you think, there's someone actually who could really do with this, please share it with them, share the love. I'm really, really grateful. And if, you want to get in contact with me for any questions, or you want to talk about coaching or any working together, feel free to reach out to me on Instagram at @theauthenticman_, or you can email me hello@theauthenticman.net. Thank you very much.